Hello and welcome to your first advanced writing online class. I know this is all a bit new and different because we're not there in person with each other, but we'll do the best that we can. My name is David Tizzard. Obviously hope to see you all soon in person, but at any point if you have any questions, any worries, any difficulties, feel free to contact me. All my information should be on the Seoul e-class syllabus. Just before we start today's lecture, probably should just point out that on the e-class system for our course, English Intensive Writing, you will find an announcement and week one's material here. So clicking on this will take you to, I'm sure you already know, but a link to our first reading for this week. Also, with the announcement, it tells you some things about the process of the course. But ultimately, if you're confused or you're not sure, feel free to send me a message through the system, or feel free to send me an email. You can find my details there. More than happy to help. Okay, so if we think about today's, or this week's first material, we're looking at George Orwell, and we're looking at George Orwell because, well, obviously he's a very famous writer, but he has some interesting techniques that we can learn. During this course, we're going to look at different writers and try to take styles, ideas, things from them and incorporate them into our own writing. Now, I should point out that there is no correct way to write. If you do IELTS, if you do TOEFL, if you do these kind of writing tests, there is a strict format. Even when I do Korean tests and things like that, there's a format that you're expected to use to pass the test. And there are rules and there are certain codes and things that you have to follow. Now, in this, what I'm teaching, there are no rules. You can write however you like. One of the key goals is to be able to communicate what you think and you feel with other people. So when we talk, you know, some of your friends will talk fast, some of your friends talk softly, some of your friends have a very sort of singing, melodic voice, others are a sort of bit more direct or monotonous. Everybody talks differently, and therefore everybody writes differently. What you're trying to do during this course is trying to find your voice, trying to develop your personal writing style, so that whenever you write, whatever it is, it might be a university essay or a report, it might be information on a PPT slide, it might be a job application, a resume, it might be an email. Whatever you write, you will be comfortable in developing your own style of writing. Now, how do you develop your own style of writing? First, compare it to music. Now, we all like different music. Yeah, some of us like jazz, some of us like pop, some of us like rock, ballads. We all like different music, and we don't expect our friends to like the same music all the time. We understand that it's subjective, right? It's habasa. It's different from person to person. And the same way it's like that with the writing. So you might look at Orwell this week and you might go, I don't really like Orwell's writing. And that's totally cool, right? That's fine, because you don't have to like it. It's just something that we're looking at. If you do like it, or if you see some things in there, then feel free to use them, because we're only looking at Orwell for 1 week. And then after that, we're going on to different things. So just bear that in mind. What you're trying to do, you're not trying to write like Orwell. You're not trying to copy all these people. You're trying to develop your own voice. And to do that in writing, you have to read and say, I like that. I don't like that. So I'm going to do more of this one and less of this one. That's what you're doing. So looking at George Orwell, most of you, perhaps all of you, encountered George Orwell maybe at middle school or high school. You have to read 동물농장 or Animal Farm, 1984, and that's kind of frustrating because, no disrespect to you, but George Orwell is very advanced, and to give it to young children means that they don't like him, or you don't feel Orwell is special. So introducing Orwell to people at sort of middle school and high school, I think, is a bad idea, because then they get turned off of Orwell and they don't read Orwell again when they're older. But I think Orwell is one of those writers. You read Animal Farm, 1984, Down and Out in Paris and London, Homage to Catalonia. If you read these books as you get older, the books get better. The books stay the same, but you change. And so always consider giving Orwell another shot. Great writer. Now, what we're going to have a look at today is his 3 paragraph writing, Down and Out in Paris and London. I did find this earlier. Sorry, it's here. You can access it. We're going to look at these 3 paragraphs. It's taken out of one of his books. It's written 1933. It's from Down and Out in Paris and London, where he spent time with homeless people, with beggars in Paris and London. We're going to go through it. Before we do, there's a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. So I'm going to switch back to the PPT. One of the main things from this, and it will make sense afterwards, is looking at this 3 paragraph structure. So there are 3 paragraphs in that work, as you just saw. Now, you might think, well, what's the first paragraph? It's the introduction and then the body, and the 3rd paragraph is the conclusion. That's the standard, typical thing. Great. George Orwell's is a bit more specific. It's a bit more nuanced than that. So to look at the overall structure before we read, it's like this. First, he presents a question. Okay, so he gives you a question, and the question is, why are beggars despised? Why don't we like beggars? Why do we feel weird about homeless people? It's a clear question. It's not ambiguous. It's not vague. So therefore, his writing has a clear point. We know what we're reading. Okay? One of the hardest things to do in writing is to choose a topic. Now, you might choose a topic. You might choose a topic of K-pop, or living abroad, or Tada, the car service things. The topic could be anything, but then what's the point? What's the question? What are you trying to say about that thing? That's very, very difficult, because you can write about anything. There are literally no limits. So limiting yourself is very important sometimes. Orwell limits himself in this work that we're studying. There's a question, right? It's a clear question. If we have a question, then we're trying to get answers. Why are beggars despised? Why do people like K-pop? Yeah? Why is living abroad good for personal development? Why is living abroad bad for personal development? The question can be anything, but Orwell starts with a question. Paragraph 1. Okay, so this is paragraph 1. What Orwell does in the beginning is he gives the general answer to the question. Why are beggars despised? Well, most people in society, or 대부분, right, they think this. So this is the common opinion. This is the general answer. Sorry about my writing here. This is the general answer, or the common opinion. If you were to put pronouns on these, and this is very important, it wouldn't be Orwell's opinion. This would be general, common, 일반적으로, right? In general, this is how people answer that question. So there's a link, right? There's the question, and it comes down here to the general answer. Why do people like K-pop? Because it is upbeat, catchy, and has wonderful videos, something like that. Yeah? It's the general opinion. Number 2. Now, number 2, you have this word here, refute. Refute means to disprove, to argue against, to criticize, bipan, something a bit like that. And so what he's doing now is he is refuting the general opinion, right? So you can see that paragraph 2 and paragraph 1 are again linked. This is what most people think, but I'm not sure that's correct, right? He's saying that I don't think these arguments, these opinions are correct. He doesn't agree with that. What he actually thinks, his personal opinion, comes here in paragraph 3. And finally, we get to know what George Orwell thinks. So he doesn't just start with his own opinion. He doesn't start, well, I think this. What he does is he presents the common idea so that we can accept it more easily. Because if it's a common idea, you've heard it before, and when you hear it, you think, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'm okay with that. If it was a personal or a unique idea, when you hear it for the first time, you might immediately be a little bit hesitant. So starting with a general idea, but then saying, hey, there's something wrong with this. There's something missing with this general idea. And then providing a new idea. Okay? So finding a common thing, saying what's wrong with it, and then providing the new thing. That's the structure. Yeah? Common thing, problems, new thing. That's how this goes with writing. And it can be very useful. You find it in a lot of academic writing, science writing, nonmuns, and things like that. If you were to present it as a structure, you have this upside down triangle here, right? You'll see this in a lot of textbooks, encouraging you, this is the way to write. And yeah, my pen work is not very good on this yet. I'm using a mouse rather than a pen. It starts with the general, and then it comes down to the specific, to the individual, to the personal, right? To this, yeah, 주권적으로. So starting with the general, make it broad so everybody can understand what you're doing, and then come in to your personal opinion. That's what's going to happen in this piece of writing. You don't have to do this with every piece of writing, but it's what he's doing here. So you might find this structure useful. Let's have a look at one more thing before we look at the writing itself, okay? So that's pretty good. I want to have a look at this use of pronouns that Orwell has. I, me, my, 저, 나이, this kind of thing, right? And depending what textbooks you read, some people will say, you know, in academic writing, you can't use I and things like that. Please understand, there are no rules to writing. Rules are there to be broken, and the best writers break the rules all the time, because that's what we do. We're humans. We break rules. Now, when we read through this piece together, have a look at when Orwell uses I, I, because he does use it, but he uses it where, sort of in what context or how, and is it effective? So he does use I, but he doesn't just use it randomly all over the place. His use of I is very interesting, and I might say it's very effective. You might have a different opinion, but I want you to look at where he uses I and how, 어디, 어떻게 he uses this I pronoun in his writing and does it attached to it. I hope you understand these two things that we're going to look at, structure and pronouns. We're going to read this 3-paragraph piece by Orwell. Read it yourself. Try to read it aloud. Right? I think reading aloud is really good because you need to hear words. You need to hear their rhythm, how they go together. That's very important. I will just say this, that, this was written 1933. That's nearly, it's not quite, but it's nearly 100 years ago. So this writing is nearly 100 years old, written by a man in Western Europe, in the United Kingdom, in England. So it's so far removed from you. If you're a young woman in modern Seoul, South Korea, 2020, everything is different between you and Orwell. Gender, location, generation, time, yeah, continents, it's all so different. But can you understand him? That's the challenge, okay? So if you can, then the writing becomes, let's say, timeless, right? It goes beyond time. That's what good writing does. So, finally onto this, let's have a look. Why are Beggars Despised by George Orwell? It is worth saying something about the social position of beggars, for when one has consorted with them and found that they are ordinary human beings, one cannot help being struck by the curious attitude that society takes towards them. People seem to feel that there is some essential difference between beggars and ordinary working men. They are a race apart, outcasts like criminals and prostitutes. Working men work, beggars do not work. They are parasites, worthless in their very nature. It is taken for granted that a beggar does not earn his living as a bricklayer or a literary critic earns his. He is a mere social excrescence, tolerated because we live in a humane age, but essentially despicable. Yet, if one looks closely, one sees that there is no essential difference between a beggar's livelihood and that of numberless respectable people. Beggars do not work, it is said. But then, what is work? A navvy works by swinging a pick, an accountant works by adding up figures, a beggar works by standing out of doors in all weathers and getting varicose veins, chronic bronchitis, etc. It is a trade like any other, quite useless of course, but then many reputable trades are quite useless. And as a social type, a beggar compares well with scores of others. He is honest compared with the sellers of most patent medicines, high-minded compared with a Sunday newspaper proprietor, amiable compared with a hire purchase tout. In short, a parasite, but a fairly harmless parasite. He seldom extracts more than a bare living from the community, and what should justify him according to our ethical ideas, he pays for it over and over in suffering. I do not think there is anything about a beggar that sets him in a different class from other people, or gives most modern men the right to despise him. Then the question arises, why are beggars despised? For they are despised universally. I believe it is for the simple reason that they fail to earn a decent living. In practice, nobody cares whether work is useful or useless, productive or parasitic. The sole thing demanded is that it shall be profitable. In all the modern talk about energy, efficiency, social service and the rest of it, what meaning is there except get money, get it legally, and get a lot of it? Money has become the grand test of virtue. By this test, beggars fail, and for this they are despised. If one could earn even £10 a week at begging, it would become a respectable profession immediately. A beggar, looked at realistically, is simply a businessman, getting his living like other businessmen in the way that comes to hand. He has not, more than most modern people, sold his honour. He has merely made the mistake of choosing a trade at which it is impossible to grow rich. Okay, 3 paragraphs there. As we said, now we can see it in application. You have the title or the question, which gives a direction. Everything underneath this follows that title. Okay, so the title, you know exactly what you're getting. Some people don't like that title. Some people would prefer sort of more ambiguous titles that you don't know what it's going to be about. Totally cool. With Orwell, it's very simple, very direct, very clear. So, we have a clear title. Paragraph 1, if you remember, we said is the general opinion. Okay, so what he's talking about here, he's talking about people, right? He's talking about men and beggars, and criminals. He's talking in the plural here, which gives us that general idea. The ordinary human being, 일반적으로, this general thing. And then the general thing related to the question. This is why we think they're despised. We, they. But then in paragraph 2, as we've said, he says, well, this is not correct, actually. Maybe we need to think differently. Maybe we need to rethink our approach. And finally, in paragraph 3, he gives his personal opinion. This is what the general opinion is, but I don't think it's right. I think this is what we do. So it builds to a conclusion. There's the 3-paragraph structure used by Orwell that we looked at earlier. So this could be any question, the general opinion, refute, disagree, show problems, and then give your own personal recommendation, your own personal solution, something like that. That's what we're looking for. So if we come back here, I can press this. That all makes sense. So when you start writing, this is one of the first things that you're going to have to think about, a question or a title. Why are beggars despised? It's really a simple question. It's not deep, but it's new. You don't read many pieces of writing with that approach. One of the hardest things in writing is to be new or original, because everybody wants to write about BTS. Everybody wants to write about the 4th Industrial Revolution. Everybody wants to write about Misemonji or the Corona COVID-19 situation. It's hard to look at the world and get something that not many other people are getting. And that's what interesting thinkers do. Now, I asked you about using pronouns, and I'm not sure if you noticed it or got it when you were looking at it, but how many times does Orwell use the pronoun I? So, if we jump back here, get rid of that, you see that in the first paragraph, there is Orwell's personal opinion, personal voice is not there. It doesn't appear yet. We have sort of they, or when one has done this. So this is kind of like a plural we. We learn about he again and his and we, but there's no I here yet. For the majority of paragraph 2 also, there is no I. The first one comes here, right? Is the first one. And then the second one comes here. So they're very close together. So we know where they are. It's the end of a paragraph and the start of a paragraph. So they're not hidden in the middle. It's very important here. They're not hidden in the middle of the paragraph, because as you read, your mind starts drifting off and you lose concentration. But normally people concentrate at the start and the end of paragraphs, right? Our concentration increases. So he's put them in key places, the end and the start of a paragraph. So we know where we found them, and we know that he does use them. Not much, but he does. Now, how does he use them? Let's have a look at the actual context here. So he's refuted, why do we hate beggars? Right? Oh, beggars don't work. That's why we don't like beggars. Beggars are parasites. Beggars are parasites. They don't work. And he says, but what is working? Yeah? Is going to a company and sitting at a computer and using Kakao Talk, is that working? There are many different types of work, and maybe a beggar is also doing his work. So now Orwell says this: I do not think there is anything about a beggar that sets him in a different class from other people. This is Orwell's opinion, and it's very clearly written. I do not think this. So you cannot be confused about Orwell's opinion. You don't have to go looking through the work to try to interpret what Orwell means. There's very clear, I do not think this. And because he hasn't used I previously in all this other work, he never used the word I. He's talking, and then he says, I do not think this. Okay. I understood your opinion because it was there. If somebody was always saying, well, I think this, and I think this, and I think this, but I don't think this, I think this, you get lost because it's all the same. But when it's just that simple, clear sentence, using that I for the first time, it has a lot of power, has a lot of punch. So that's how he does it. He does not think this. Great, we've got it. In the next paragraph, I believe this. Okay. So from those simple things, we know what Orwell doesn't think, and we know what he does think. And that's what we are looking for. So pronouns can be very effective. The point here is, if you save your I, you don't have to, but if you save your I, it can be very effective and it can be very powerful. So I hope you've understood that, because I'd like to move on and have a look at something else. I told you that it starts with a question, right? Notice that in the third paragraph, it comes back to this question. Okay? It comes back to this question. So the work has a complete type of logic. It doesn't go away. It doesn't lose track. It doesn't go off point and go anywhere else. Because of the question, and it comes back to the question, so it's very 논리적으로, very logical, and it follows that. That's really hard, because when you're writing, the thoughts come in your head, but our thoughts don't come logically. Our thoughts come sort of left and right and backwards and forwards. They don't come in a logical pattern. Same thing when we dream. They just pop into our heads. So we have to edit and we have to shape sometimes, right? So you can see here that by using the question again at the end, the same question, the work keeps this logical progression. So here is the question, and then here is the answer. It's not a very long piece of work. Here's a question, here's the background, here is the answer. The answer is the conclusion. Now, let's have a look at, I go this way. Let's go this way, sorry. This. Starting sentences, right? So what I mean is each paragraph, the starting sentence, because it's natural that we concentrate more at the start of a paragraph. And as the paragraph goes on, we sort of lose, and then we start again, right? You might notice that when you're reading something, or even when you're listening, at some point, you've lost it. You're daydreaming, you're thinking about something else, and if you go back into the book, you realize, that's the point where I stopped getting it, where I stopped paying attention. You have to go back to that point. Right? That normally happens in the middle of a paragraph. Start of paragraphs are very important. You have to keep readers with you. So, start of Orwell's paragraphs are great because they tell you what's coming in the paragraph. So he starts here. It is worth saying something about. It is worth saying something about dung dung dung, right? It is worth saying something about the social position of beggars. So he's introducing his topic, and he's also saying that it's important. He's saying, here's the topic today, and it's worth talking about. It's something that we need to think about, to consider. So he's introducing the topic, but giving a justification for it. He's saying this topic is important for us to talk about. This topic is important for us to consider. You can use it. You can steal it. You can copy it. Take it for yourself. Right? So some examples here. It is worth saying something about the role of women in society. Yeah. It is worth saying something about the recent hostility between Japan and South Korea. So just you can take this and you can absolutely just take it from Orwell, put it into your own work, because you're not taking the content, you're not talking about beggars, you're not taking his ideas, you're just taking a little bit of his structure. Now, when you listen to, say, a song, if you play piano or if you play guitar, you listen to a song and you say, that's a nice chord. Well, what chord is that? That's a B minor. Okay, well, I'll use that B minor. I'm not going to copy or use a whole song or use the whole melody, but it's just a chord. In the same way, this is just like a chord. Well, I'll use this chord and I'll reinterpret it in my own writing. So when you read, if you see nice little sort of expressions, paragraphs, feel comfortable, take them, put them into yours. That's what good writers do. Now, you can also, you can take them, but you can also adapt them. Right? So this also helps. It is worth saying something about. Well, saying something about, we could just change this. It is worth discussing the role of women in society because, so we can just change that. You can use adverbs or sort of modal quantifiers or busa, things like that. It is probably worth paying attention to how people act on the subway. Right? So you can take this and you can just straight up copy it, or you can adapt it for your own work. I need to kind of move my face here, sorry. Let's see what happens if I do that. Oh, I don't need to do it yet. So feel free to sort of copy little phrases. How to introduce a topic? Well, you can just use this. And if you start your writing with that, great. Old man learning technology, right? Try to understand me if it takes me a second. Now, paragraph 2 starts with this. Yet. 하지만, 근데, 그렇지만. Yet, however, but. The second paragraph starts with that word. Starts with the word yet, or it starts with the word however. So, because it starts with that word, you should know that the whole focus of that paragraph is going to be about that. It's saying that this is a turning paragraph. This is a paragraph that turns the idea. This is the but paragraph. For example, if this paragraph started with and, we would know, it's going to continue that idea. Blah, 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 blah. And, okay, so this is continuing. But the paragraph itself, this section of writing, starts with but. Okay, so it's going to be turning here. Even if you don't understand all the words, all the ideas, totally fine. You know that just because of that word, which you might understand, that kind of 하지만, it's turning here. Or if it started with so, 그래서. Okay, so it's coming into a therefore, a conclusion. It's drawing on it. These words set good markers. It's like a map that you follow. So you know what's coming. It's not a surprise. You know what's coming because he uses yet. Finally, in the third paragraph, it comes back to the question and then the answer. So then the question arises. Why are beggars despised? He starts. It's worth saying something about beggars because this always happens. But it's weird. So the question is this, right? 1, 2, 3. That's how he's going. Then the question arises, why are beggars despised? I believe this. So you could use the same thing here. Press buttons. The question arises, comma, speech marks. Why are women paid less? Question mark. Speech marks. That's the punctuation. The question arises, why are women paid less? The question arises, why are BTS suddenly very popular, but K-pop wasn't as big 10 years ago in the West. Or you can add things to it. Thus, the question arises, what caused the hostility between Japan and South Korea? Something that you can take, put into your own writing. So, there is a question. Change it, adopt it, make it your own. Starting sentences, just to recap what we're doing here, right? The starting sentences at the beginning of the paragraphs kind of indicate to you what the paragraph is going to be about. So, as an English speaker, I know that the vocabulary, 단어, might be a bit difficult for you. That's why it's short. But as an English speaker, it's hard to get lost with Orwell. You don't really get lost. You get lost with people like Proust or Nietzsche. You don't get lost with Orwell because everything is clearly indicated. But it's clearly indicated in a very effective and simple way. Right? It's not like, first I will talk about this, there are 3 reasons why this happens. First, this, second, this. It's like that when you do a test, science answer or a language test, but it's in more of a literary, artistic way. Let's have a look at this. Highlighting words. How does Orwell highlight certain words? Well, you can see some of the techniques here. You can see this is using Control B, had to look, right? Which is, to make the word bold. You could also use red here. You can use speech marks. You can use italics, Control I, Control U, right? So these techniques, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, can highlight words in your writing, and very useful to do. Let's have a look. Well, just looking very quickly, I can see some here, the speech marks. I can see things italic and bold, yeah. So why does he do these? And it's not always the same technique. People seem to feel, I'm reading now, people seem to feel that there is some essential difference between beggars and ordinary working men. They are a race apart, outcasts like criminals and prostitutes. Working men work, beggars do not work. See, he's putting our attention onto these words. He's asking you to think about this word and consider it. Ordinary working men, working men. Well, what is a working man? Right? Is the CEO of Samsung and a toilet cleaner? They're both working men. So there's no difference between them. They both work. And some people don't work. So does a Buddhist monk work? If a monk works in a temple, is he working? It's asking you to consider what is work here, right? With these things. And he brings it to you later. Well, what is work? Right now, if you're watching this lecture, are you working? Are you studying? Is there a difference between the two? I know this is a little bit sort of philosophical or 철학적으로, but it's asking you to consider certain words. He doesn't say very seriously, but because of this, he's highlighting them. And in your brain, you'll slowly be thinking about these. So highlighting certain pieces in your writing can be very useful. And you can use color, when people do it now, especially in online writing, things like that. You can put sentences or words in red and things like that, if that's what you want. Underlining, Control U, so it has a line underneath, also very common. Italics, very common. But think about the aesthetic. What I mean is, does it look nice? Does it look good? Because if it's all random all over the place, it might look messy. You want something that, when you look at a piece of writing, right, it's got to look good, even before you read. You've got to look at it and go, that looks okay. That looks great. that looks interesting. You know, think about when you do a piece of writing, how does it look? And you can change the look of writing by your use of highlighting words. You can also change the look by how big your paragraphs are. You know, if your paragraphs are this big or this big or this big, your writing will look different. And your writing will also look different when you use techniques highlighting certain words. Highlight them for meaning because you want attention on these words. You highlight them for meaning, but you also highlight them so that your writing looks nice, aesthetically pleasing. So when someone picks it up, they say, oh, that looks good. Okay. So you might want to practice or, you know, think about trying to do that in your writing. You won't get it right first time. You'll be stuck. You'll use it too much or incorrectly. But my point is this: there are no rules. You just have to try it and start. Okay? So you find out what works well for you. Let's have a look at this idea of cohesion. So different word forms. It's the same word, but a different form. So you might have the 명사, the 동사, the 형용사, the noun, the verb, the adjective. Same word, but in a different form. Now, Orwell does this quite a lot. And the effect of using this, if you do this, the effect can be that it increases cohesion, brings it together, makes it tighter, increases the bond between the ideas. So let's have a look. Maybe you can see it. I need to do this first. There we go. And if we think about where does Orwell use these word forms? Sorry. You can see here we've got working and work. Yeah, that's good. You'll see this one. Essentially and essential. It's the same word. But essentially is at the end of paragraph 1, and essential is the start of paragraph 2. So it's the same word, but just seen a little bit differently. So it reminds you of what you've already read. So you'll notice that if you listen to classical music, right, pop music gives you the same thing all the time. If you listen to classical music, it gives you this idea, but then it keeps changing the idea slightly. Yeah? It keeps reintroducing it and revisiting it. That's what Orwell is doing here. Here's essentially, and now it's essential, right? You have this one with despised and despicable. It's the same word, right? But it's a different form. And you have it down here as well. Despise one more time. I need to do this to come down. And despise to despised, right? So you notice that he uses these to give cohesion between the paragraphs. This is a big gap, right? This is a big empty white space with no writing. We want to make sure that the reader comes across this gap. And each paragraph is a new idea. We need the reader to come from this idea to this idea. So we need to give them something familiar, something in this new paragraph that reminds them where they have been. So this helps bridge the gap, right? Despise to despised. You notice that, he'll do it quite a bit here. It's the same thing. I don't think it's coincidence. I think that's what Orwell is doing, in my personal opinion. He's using this to bridge the gap between paragraphs. And you notice that the word form does change. It's not the exact same word. The word form changes, right? Now, he also does it. He also does it across the entire paragraph. So it makes the whole piece cohesive, not just between paragraphs, but also in longer gaps between paragraphs. Brings it all in, brings it all together like that for you. So if whatever your topic is, get a word and then think about 3 different forms for it. So if you're writing about music, you want to write about K-pop, you want to write about rock and roll, you write about jazz, doesn't matter. You might have the word melody. Well, then why don't you also think of, well, melodic? Okay, despised and despicable, melody and melodic. Okay, I'll put those 2 words together. If you're writing about travel or living abroad or something like that, you might have the word adventure, but then you might also have adventurous, so you're getting adjectives and nouns. Once you've got your topic, think of what might be the key words, right? And then see if you can find 2 or 3 different forms. What's the verb? What's the noun? What's the adjective, right? Despised, despicable, despised, essential, essentially, okay? And you can play with those words to help make the writing more cohesive. If you're still paying attention, well done. I know this is probably very hard. Last thing I'd like you to consider is this. It's just about finished, right? This is Orwell's main point. I'm not sure if you've understood it, but Orwell's point is that we judge people according to how much money they have. Not whether they're good or bad people, but are they rich or not? And so he argued that if beggars were really rich, if in one day a beggar didn't earn 5,000 won, but 5,000 won, but a beggar earned 500만 won, 5 million won, $5,000, we would like beggars more. That's his argument. Our like or dislike of people sometimes comes down to how much money they have in this society. And because beggars are very poor, they don't have much money, we look down upon them. But if they had more money, we would think higher of them, even if they did the exact same thing. That's Orwell's point. It's not the beggar's fault. It's the society or the type of world that we live in. That's something interesting to consider, I think. It's maybe something that you've not thought of before. And that's a challenge of writing, to write something that makes people think. There are, obviously, George Orwell was very interested in social class. Ki Sang-chung, Bong Joon-ho's film, is about parasites, and you see that exact word and that idea in this writing. Parasite is not a new thing. People were talking about this 100 years ago. So Orwell was very interested in the lives of the poor people. Generally, this is also something to consider. All right. There are 2 types of people in this way. The first type of person is very interested in the poor people, cares about the poor people. The second type of person just hates the rich people. Yeah, so whether it comes from jealousy or disappointment. Yeah, this unfair. George Orwell wasn't like that. He didn't hate the rich. He genuinely seemed to care about the lives of the poor people. So there's 2 different ways that you can look at social class. You can say, yeah, these people are not good, that's unfair. Okay, that's maybe the more natural reaction. But Orwell did something different. He looked down and he actually said, well, no, these are people. Right? Let's not hate the rich, let's love the poor. Interesting idea. You might have heard that elsewhere, I guess. So This is Orwell's writing. What I would consider, or what I would ask you to do now, is to try to write something. You've got to write a lot, okay? So you can write on pen and paper, you can write on your computer, doesn't matter. I would like you to try to write something. When you write something, try to consider the things that we have done today. So, can you think of a question? Really hard. Write down 4 or 5, right? Think of one. No, don't just try to get one question and that's it. Write down 4 or 5 questions and then pick the best one. It's hard to come up with the final idea straight away. Normally we go through a process, okay? The final idea doesn't always come to us. Normally we have to go, we get the first idea, we mix them all together and then we get it. So come up with a few possible titles or questions for a piece of writing. Once you've kind of got something that feels nice in your brain, then try to write. And as you write something, see if you can do something with Orwell's 3-paragraph structure. We started like this, okay? So see if you can do something that you've got your question, and then how do you move from the question to the answer? What's the process? We know that Orwell does this. This is Orwell's process. What's your process? How are you going to do it? If you can do it, you don't have to copy Orwell exactly, but you should try something. You can copy him if you want. It's a great idea. Also, consider how you use pronouns. Maybe you want to start your work. I said, when Orwell uses I don't believe, I believe, I said that was very effective. You might think, what if my writing, the first sentence is, I believe this? Also very powerful. There are no rules. You have to get all this and you have to do something. That's how you write. Consider cohesion, right? Get it, not for every word, but get a couple of important words and do cohesion. And maybe if you want, steal a little bit of Orwell, right? Take a bit of Orwell and put it in you. That's not a bad thing. If you do that in week 1, your writing will look a bit like Orwell. But if you do it for a whole semester, at the end of the semester, if you've got a little bit of all these great writers in your writing, well then, and it's all those great writers and you, well then that will be something new and original. Because many people have put writers together, but you have never done it with your own personality and voice. So that's what you want to try and consider. Just to be clear, I would like you now to try to write something. Please find a way to share it on the e-class. I think there's a way you should be able to do that. Doesn't have to be long or huge, it can be 200 words, it can be 500 words, something like that, according to your ability. Try to write something, try to share it on the e-class, and I'll have a look at them and I'll give feedback where necessary. If you have any questions, 만약에 어떤 질문이 있으면 그냥 연락 주세요. Just contact me any way you can and I'm happy to help you. I know this is a new situation. It's all a bit weird. It's weird for me too. Well, I'm sure we can do it and I'm happy to help you write. Okay, that's the end of the first week on Orwell. Thank you if you've made it this far. You might have to watch it in a few parts. Get in touch if you have any questions and I will speak to you next time. Bye-bye.